Hello and welcome to episode 8 of Acceptable Madness. My name is Scott, and this is the podcast for depressed people. So the topic of this podcast this week is going to be sleep. And I know that seems like one of the most unsexy topics to have in any podcast ever, but part of the reason that I wanted to bring it up is because I genuinely believe that it's one of the most helpful ways to deal with depression, and I'll start to explain why once we get into this. So the other thing that I just wanted to say starting this off is so I've been doing a lot of different things in terms of like trying a lot of different mediums and putting my stuff out there. And I started with a blog, and now I'm kind of starting to play with Instagram and Facebook and other places like that. But I guess one of the big changes is I'm going to start publishing this podcast weekly as opposed to bi-weekly. Now that I've figured out, now that I'm a bit more comfortable with how it all operates and actually kind of putting myself out there. And honestly, I've just been having a lot more fun with it. So that's just one change. So expect it. I always put it up at right around 6 a.m. Monday morning. That's when I schedule it, but I use WordPress, and sometimes it can be off by a little bit. So expect it there, and then I'll post something about it on either Facebook or Instagram, just to remind people about it. But with that, I'll dive right into this. So the reason that I wanted to talk about sleep is because, again, I know that it's an unsexy topic, and I know that it's something that, like, yeah, you hear that you're supposed to get 7 or 8 hours of sleep every night, and a lot of people just kind of disregard that, because why sleep for 8 hours a night when you can sleep for 6 hours a night and do something more fun for an extra 2 hours of your day? And I absolutely understand that thought process. I had it for a really long time. But the reason that I think sleep is so important is because if you can wake up in the morning and you have that little bit of extra energy that you get from getting a nice 8-hour night of sleep, it makes getting out of bed, and it makes kind of starting your day, no matter how you're feeling, it makes it a little bit easier because you feel a bit more ready to get at it and just kind of roll with the punches. So if you can wake up with 8 hours of sleep in the morning, you're ready for the day. I mean, you still might have a really bad day, and if you're feeling particularly depressed or anxious, 8 hours of sleep, it's not going to be a cure-all. It's not like if you go to bed at 10 today and wake up at 6 tomorrow, then all of a sudden you're going to be completely perfect and you're not going to have any problems. But it'll give you a little bit of a security blanket and a little bit of safety for when you do get out of bed, you'll have a bit more energy to handle all these negative thoughts that might go through your head. And the way that I came to this conclusion was, so I'm 22 and I graduated college a little over a year ago. And before that, I had an internship with one company that I won't name or anything, but I had an internship with them, and I hated every second of it. So I majored in marketing, and it was a strategic marketing and planning internship, but it was at a very engineering-centric company. So I didn't necessarily have all of the engineering background that I needed, but for just kind of coming up with strategy and understanding the field, you don't need to be an expert physicist or anything. You just kind of need to understand the benefits and the product itself and the company and where they stand out in the market. That's not super important, but basically what I'm saying is the job made sense, and I feel like I did the job decently well while I was there, but the problem was that the company, whenever they were looking for interns and looking for people to hire, they were almost exclusively interested in engineers. To the point where there was one point, so all the interns got together for like a lunch with the CEO, and during the conversation with the CEO, he mentioned something along the lines of, if I could hire a secretary if I could hire an engineer as a secretary, then I would do that, but that's too expensive. So that just kind of shows where the company's stance on non-engineering people is. And what that kind of led to was a lot of the work that I did just kind of being disregarded and kind of just thrown out the window. So I actually had this internship for 2 years, and the first summer that I was there, I worked on this one project for maybe 15 weeks, maybe 14, somewhere around there. But then and I didn't want to go back the second time, but I actually just couldn't find another internship, so I kind of fell into that position again. But whenever I had gone back, one of the very first things that I had learned was all of the work that I had done the year prior had been thrown away. And the reason for that was they wanted to take their strategic department in a different direction because they were opening up a new division, stuff that doesn't matter. But basically, all the work that I had done over the summer prior was pointless. And then walking into a job where you know that's the case, and you know that that's kind of how they value your work and effort, doesn't lead to a good experience. So what does this have to do with sleep? This is what made me realize that sleep can be very important and make you feel better about life in general, along with a lot of other things. So what I would do is I'd go to work, and I'd work from 8 to 5. I had a 1-hour break in the middle of the day, and then I would come home. And I used to play a lot more video games than I do now, but this was in the peak of me playing. What I would do is I would come home, and I would jump on, I jumped onto Xbox, and I would play the game Rainbow Six Siege with like 6 or 7 friends. We'd get on, different group every night, but everyone would get on, and no one was happy with their job because you're just being an intern, and no one was thrilled about it. But so it was a lot of us just kind of venting about our positions and then diving in and just playing the game. So I did that for the first summer that I was there. I did it basically every night for the first 2 months. And then the thing that kind of made me realize that I'm playing a lot of games was not the fact that I was doing it every day for 2 months, but it was the fact that I saw it, so the Xbox records your time and how much you've actually put into a specific game. And in 2 months, maybe a month and a half, I had put in 7 or 8 days of playtime. And so that was me coming home and playing hours upon hours every night for a while. And that just, it caught me very off guard. And I would play late into the night, so like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And I was always exhausted at work, but I hated my job and I hated doing everything with it. I knew that they didn't care about the output that I had. So I definitely was not a model employee. I have no problem admitting that. But I would come home and I would just play games. And then I would get like sometimes 4 hours of sleep, sometimes 5 hours of sleep every night. But I went in and I was exhausted and I was at my desk, and sometimes I would struggle to stay awake. And then I would come home and then I would play more games. Well, once I saw the number that I had played upwards of 7 or 8 days in like a month and a half to 2 months, I was absolutely blown away. And I was like, okay, well, I know that I have these other hobbies that I like to do because I had discovered that I like writing a lot, but I hadn't really jumped into it yet. Not like face first into it, but I dabbled with it. But I realized that I wanted to dedicate some time to my writing. So I would start taking, like a modest amount of time after work every day, like 5 minutes, 10 minutes or something, and I would just start writing. And then I realized that I was having a really, really, really difficult time coming up with anything creative. And whatever I did come up with creative, it was sloppy, or it wasn't well thought out, or it was just unworkable. And so I would just go back to Xbox, but I wasn't happy doing that. I just had this kind of epiphany, and I realized that I really liked writing, but I couldn't do it at that moment. And I was like, well, this is awful. And so I was pretty upset with myself just generally. And, but I knew that I could go back and play Xbox. So I would go and do that. Then after a few more days, maybe a few more weeks, I realized that I was still very unsatisfied with the fact that I wasn't writing as much. So I told all of my friends on Xbox that I wasn't going to play for a while. And I just stopped. I cut cold turkey. I stopped playing it. And I started going to bed at like 10 or 10:30. So and my reasoning was maybe I'll have a bit more energy, or maybe I'll be able to think clearer if I can go to work and I come home and I'm not totally mentally exhausted yet. Maybe I'll be able to come home and actually put in some good effort and have more fun with what I really love doing, which is writing and not as much playing video games. So I did that, and I came home every day for a week, And then I went to my computer and I started writing. And I had this book that I was working on a little bit here and there, but I really wanted to dive into it because I was really excited by the idea. So I would come home, and at first maybe whenever I was trying before and I was just coming home and I was trying to type for like 5 minutes, I'd write like 100 words and then just throw it away. But then I got to a point where I was having a bit more energy whenever I came home, and I was really determined not to play games and not to use my time that way. I don't think video games are a waste of time, but for me, it's not what I'm passionate about. So to me, it was wasting my time because there were other things out there that I wanted to do more. And even today, like I play a lot less video games, but I have a lot of fun with them. They're just not my passion. So I can play them a decent amount and not get bored or not hate the time that I've spent doing it. But if I were to spend like 8 hours a day doing it for like a week, then I would be miserable and I'd go back to the same feeling that I had back then. But I dove into this book, and instead of writing 100 words that I hated and deleted, I wrote like 1,000 in the first night. And then honestly, the thing that stopped me was the fact that my hands and wrists were exhausted because I wasn't used to sitting down there and just typing that much. Like at work, it's a lot of just clicking and checking email because you don't have anything to do, or at least that was the case for me. So I wasn't used to typing long documents or long strings of words. So I was exhausted after the first night. And then I did the same thing. I went to bed at a reasonable time, and I woke up the next day, and I was unbelievably happy. Not happy, but I was happier. I was a lot more satisfied with what I had done the night before. And I woke up with more energy because I had gotten a good amount of sleep. And what I wanted to do with that energy is I went to work, and I sat at my desk and waited till 5. But whenever I came home, I had thought the whole day about what kind of ideas and what kind of things I wanted to write about and what the next step in my book was going to be. And I went downstairs and I started writing. And instead of 1,000 words, maybe it was more like 1,500. And then the next day it was like 2,000. It was basically I was putting out as much as I could. And when you're doing, at the end I was doing like 4,500 to 5,000 words a day. And when you get to that point, books come together pretty quickly. And I know that writing a book is a really daunting task, but really, if just like anything, if you're passionate about it and you're excited to write about it and you're excited about what you're doing, the time really does fly by. So I'd write like 5,000 words in like 3 hours, and then I'd come up and I would eat dinner with my family, and then I would go to bed mentally exhausted, but with a small smile on my face because I had done what I really wanted to do. And I did this for a week, and I was thrilled, but I wasn't done with my book or anything. So what I did was I took off an entire week of work. I didn't take any vacation for the rest of the summer, but I could take off as many days as I really wanted to. They were pretty lenient with that. So I took off an entire week, and what I did was I finished the book. Like I had maybe 5,000 words going into the summer, and then by the end of those 2 weeks, I had upwards of 65 to 70,000 words. Now, this is not me patting myself on the back. The book is terrible in its current state. The idea is still, I think, has a lot of potential, but it looks like someone's first attempt at writing a book, and that's exactly what it is. And it still needs a lot of work, and it's not something I'm proud of the fact that I accomplished it, but I'm not super proud of the writing within it. So, this isn't me just, again, being proud of myself or patting myself on the back. All I'm trying to say is I know that I was kind of taken by my passion for writing and storytelling for this, but the thing that let me keep doing it was the fact that I was able to go to bed at night at a reasonable time, and even though I hated my job, I would wake up on time and I'd get breakfast and everything, and then I'd go to work and I'd be miserable, but then I'd be able to come home and focus on what I'm actually passionate about. And it was a better use of my time that summer, and it was a lot more fun, and it led me to the hobbies and stuff that I like doing now. And I know that I know that sleep seems like such a weird topic for depression, but you know, if you have depression, then the world, it always seems so much more dramatic than it is. everything feels like the end of the world. At least it does for me. Like, whether it's me ordering a Christmas gift and it not coming on time to me showing up late to work or something, like it always feels like the end of the world. And, it can be weird and difficult. But being able to get that extra sleep, it put me in a state where I was a little bit better to handle that. And I was a little bit better at pushing those thoughts down. And then because I was doing something that I was passionate about and something that I actually wanted to do, as opposed to just video games and work, I was able to wake up the next day with a lot of energy and a lot of excitement to do what I was going to do. And upon reflection, I was able to see and I knew this in the moment too, was why I stayed up so late in the first place. And it's a weird vicious cycle. So I didn't like my job, and I didn't want to wake up for my job in the morning. So what I would do is I would stay up really late till like 1 a.m. and I'd get 5 hours of sleep, and then I'd wake up and I'd be exhausted. And I would hate the fact that I have to go into my job, and I would hate my job, and I would hate everything about it. But then I'd come home and I'd be too exhausted to do anything. But I didn't want to wake up for my job, so I'd go to bed late again. And then it would just keep happening and keep happening and keep happening. And eventually 2 months passed, and I had accomplished nothing that I wanted to. And I really don't define myself by my career, because I don't know. I know I need money and stuff, but it's not what I identify with. It's just something that I have to do. So the fact that was the only part of my life that was seeing any sort of anything, like any sort of activity, was the fact that I had to go to this job that I didn't like. It kept wearing me down, and it was really hard to keep getting up in the morning. And then once you have a depressed thought, it keeps escalating. And every morning you wake up and you're doing this job that you hate, and you don't have anything that you're looking forward to in a day, it escalates more and more. And then those thoughts of, wow, I hate my job, this is awful, they can go from that to something a lot more drastic and potentially dangerous. And it all starts with getting a good night's sleep, which is so weird, because there's also that desire to do something different and that drive to want to be happier and do something better with your time. But the willingness to do all of that and follow through with it, as opposed to like having it be this thought that just passes because you still hate your job, was getting enough sleep. Because I couldn't write a book or even record a podcast or maintain a steady social media schedule on Facebook and Instagram. I couldn't do any of that if I was just mentally exhausted all the time. So even to this day, I really try to get 8 hours of sleep, and I'll wake up on my own most days, or at least on the weekends. Like, I don't really need to set alarms most times. I can usually get up at like 8 or 9 and then go get a cup of coffee and enjoy my morning. And then when like 1 or 2 comes around, I'm pretty ready to dive into what I actually want to do. And then during the week, no matter the job that I have now, no matter if I love it or hate it, I have enough energy to come home and do what I actually care about. And I mean, there's alternatives that other people like to use, such as a lot of coffee, like 10 cups a day, or like 5 Hour Energy or Monster or whatever other drinks. But and they can be helpful. Like I just said that I like having coffee in the morning, but I don't really use it as something to wake me up. I more use it because I like having it in my routine. And not needing to rely on something such as coffee or some other energy drink is helpful too, because then if you wake up late and you don't have access to that coffee or whatever else, you can still continue on with your day, and it's not like you've just wasted a day of your life because you don't have your coffee. Yeah, it's weird. I know. Again, I know it's a really unsexy topic, but it just, to me, it really, really matters. Being depressed and anxious all the time is something that can already cause people to be very tired mentally and physically. So doing whatever you can to bring more energy into that to combat it is really important. If you're totally exhausted every day, and you have one of those days where you're not feeling anything, like you don't want to get out of bed and you don't want to do anything productive or anything, period, just being less tired will make you want to get out of bed because like your body is ready to start the day. So instead of waking up and just laying in bed all day, you wake up with this drive to do something, even if it's just eat breakfast or go out to like your living room or whatever and like watching TV or playing video games or reading a book or anything. Having enough sleep can really drive some of that stuff. So I really do believe that it's one of the most important things you can have most important thing you can do when you have depression, because it just prepares you to deal with it. It's not running away from the problem. Like, at no point will I ever say that sleep makes you less depressed, because depression doesn't just go away, but it makes you more prepared to deal with it and find what you really, and it makes you excited to find what really has a higher chance of making you happy. So, honestly, all I can say is try to find the amount of sleep that works best for you and try to make it work with your schedule. If it means playing a little bit less video games and staying up till 1 a.m, give it a shot, even just for like a week, and see what kind of change happens. If it means reading less before bed or putting your phone down before bed so that you're mentally more ready for it. If it means trying to find some better job because you're so unmotivated to get up in the morning that it's really hard to do anything when you do have to get up, look for a better job. Do what you can to really be happier, and everything else will start to fall into place at least a little bit. So, and I think it all starts with a good night's sleep. So that's just one man's opinion, but I think it's one of the few things that you have complete control over, and I do think that it can be very helpful. So, but that's all I really have to say about this. So if you have any questions, feel free to comment or send me like a message on Facebook or something like that. And I'd be happy to answer them. And, like I said, this podcast is now going to be weekly. So, there will be a lot more topics that I will be covering. So if you have anything that like you're personally struggling with and you're not 100% sure how to deal with it, and, you'd like some guidance or help or just my thoughts on it, and I feel like I can comfortably give my thoughts on whatever that is, just shoot me a message and I'd be happy to consider it. So thanks, and I will see you next week. Bye.